Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Need to Know, a series of video interviews with companies who are shaping, creating, and innovating in the games industry today, and whose work will have a huge impact going forwards into the future. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Phil Wildman of GG Insurance, here to talk to us today about insurance in the games industry and look at some of the must-know secrets that could save your business. Before we get going, Phil, it's lovely to see you. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you for that intro. Yeah, great to see you too, mate.
No worries. Do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about your background and what it is that you do at GG?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Yeah, so super quick background. I've been a huge gamer since I was a child. I remember playing Monkey Island 2 when I was small, and it just captured my imagination. And I've just been addicted ever since. Love video games. Unfortunately ended up in insurance for my career. I didn't know the games industry was an option back at careers day at school, and I've been doing insurance now for 20 years. All sorts of things in there, which has been interesting career. And then about 7 years ago, I came up with the idea of well, who's insuring all of these games that I love playing? It's a big industry. There's hundreds and hundreds of games in my library. So there must be lots of businesses out there. What are they doing? Is there some way that I could maybe do this as a bit of a side project in addition to what I was doing at the time? And that's kind of how it started. One of the first things I did was I joined Ukie and went along to their offices wearing my suit and tie and all insurance up. I remember, yeah, Sam Collins kind of took me aside. Oh, I really wear suits in this industry. That's, oh, this is great. I love it. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. We've been doing this now for 7 years. We've developed our knowledge an awful lot. The team has grown massively, which is great. We have hundreds of clients now all around the world, across the USA, some in Australia, even Europe, UK, obviously, all the way from small indies up to big publishers. We're very proud to have some pretty prestigious businesses on our books, which is great. And I still get super excited when a client comes along and it's a game that I play or I have played, and yeah, I love being able to do this for a living. So yeah, that's our background. Super quick intro. So nice to meet all of you. Hopefully this video will be of interest. I know insurance can sound like a bit of a boring topic, but it's all about risk. It's all about like how to prevent things going wrong. It's not just about like, buy an insurance policy and hope nothing goes wrong. Like the best thing is to try to be aware of these potential pitfalls. There's some things that you might not have considered. And I always say prevention is the best medicine. Insurance is a safety net. It's not really there to just, well, we have insurance, so we don't care now. It's like, it's try and put some best practices in place. So the idea of today's video is to try and explain roughly kind of what insurance is, just a quick whistle-stop tour of various different types of protection you can get, but also kind of look into some of the secrets of insurance, some hacks and top tips and stuff. So ideally, even if you decide not to buy any insurance, you at least are armed with a bit of like working knowledge to try and sort of help protect yourself as much as possible. So yeah, hopefully you'll get some value from this video.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate you giving that outline. Really helpful indeed. So we should launch straight in then. Gaming insurance. What would you like to sort of start us off with? What do they mean? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's usually the first thing that people ask us is like, well, what is gaming insurance? And the truth is, and I'm going to give myself away here, is there's not really any such thing as video game insurance. What we're really talking about is insurance for games companies. So that would be things like professional indemnity, directors and officers insurance, cyber insurance, but tailored for games companies, and made available to them. So what happens? And this is the biggest issue that a lot of games companies face is normal insurers. And I should have mentioned at the start. So our role in all of this is we're a broker. So we'll talk to games companies, assess their needs, assess their risks, and then we'll try and match them up with insurers. And so depending on the size, it'll be this insurer, that insurer, where they're based, whatever. And these insurers do not have like an out of the box, this is a games product for you. They'll have an existing professional indemnity type of cover that would suit a media entertainment company. And then our role in this is to make sure that that covers off all of the risks that that games company might have. So whether they're a developer or a publisher or work for hire, or doing like film and media and entertainment stuff in addition to video games, the key thing is to make sure that they're covered for their own risks and their activities. It makes a big difference, you know, if they're working on their own in-house IP or licensing in a product, there could be different relationships at play there. So when we talk about sort of gaming insurance, really what we're talking about is insurance for games companies that is appropriate for them. So what we do as GG Insurance is we're not trying to reinvent insurance, although we kind of do a little bit behind the scenes, and we try and tailor it and bespoke it as much as possible. Really, that the trick is to make sure that whatever policies these companies are getting is right and appropriate for their business, and that is the biggest slip up that we see is when we have companies that come to us and they show us that they've got this policy from, I'm not going to name names, but there's certain insurers out there, and you look at it and you're like, you're not covered. Like it'll have even something as basic as this excludes video games, and you're like, how long have you had this for? And it's difficult because you know they don't know what they don't know. So that's kind of what games insurance really is, and it's identifying the kind of risks that are unique to developers, publishers, and then making sure that they're at least being offered protection that covers them for that particular risk. And there's all sorts of weird things with the games industry that most insurers don't like. So things like motion capture. If you're doing that in-house, suddenly you're no longer just a desk-based company. It's like, oh, you could be coordinating fights and stuff like that. So then there's actually an injury liability of your staff, or if you've got actors coming in, like who's covering that. So it's all these kind of, the games industry is like super interesting. There's so many different ways that games are being made, all kinds of different risks at play. So that's kind of a very long answer to what is games insurance, but that's it really.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like sort of not having a one-size-fits-all sort of option really makes a lot of sense. So yeah, no, I mean, you've listed off quite a ream of different types of insurance at the top of that piece. I mean, is there anything in particular that games companies should be focused on?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple. So in the UK, it's worth mentioning this now. In the UK, if you're a business that has employees, legally you're required to have employers' liability insurance. The only reason I mention that is the only one that's like a legal requirement in the UK, and you don't actually need a game specialist for that. You can go get it off the shelf. It's cheap as chips. I'm just mentioning that because it's a legal requirement. But for general activities, something called professional indemnity. So you may have come across yourselves, anyone listening to this. You might have seen it in some contract requirements. It's also known as errors and omissions insurance, sometimes called professional liability. That's effectively, and depending where you buy it from as well, and this is another key point, is professional indemnity from insurer A could be very different from professional indemnity from insurer B or C. There's a lot of nuance to this, and the key thing that I want to sort of stress here is please read the wordings and look at the coverages in detail, or if not, get a broker that can explain it to you, because you could get professional indemnity, and I would say this is probably one of the first ones you want to look at. A good coverage will cover three sort of main areas, and that would be breaching contracts. So as soon as you start working with other companies, whether you're outsourcing work or doing work for hire, or as soon as there's another company or contract in play, you could be at risk of being accused of breaching that contract. So professional indemnity, key one there. Also, intellectual property is often included in professional indemnity. And by IP, I'm talking predominantly about copyright and trademark infringement. So if your work is accused of infringing someone else's copyright, it might not be, it might be fine, but you have to sort of defend your position. You could rack up quite a lot of legal costs defending yourself, and win, but then you've got your big sort of lawyer's bill to pay. So, oh great, we won, but then you've got this big bill. Again, insurance helps with that. And then the third thing would be cyber liability. So let's say a good example of that would be, let's say you were doing some work for hire on GTA 6 or something, and you've got access to all the source files. You get hacked into, suddenly GTA 6 has been leaked on Reddit because they've hacked into you. You'd be liable for that. So three fairly key risks in there. So professional indemnity with a good insurer will generally address most of these. So I would say that's probably the first part of call, because of the risks associated with this. This tends to be the most expensive type of insurance of the run-of-the-mill insurances. There's other stuff that's more complex, but yeah, generally that's where most of the money is going to go on the professional indemnity for good reason. That's where we see most of the claims. That's where the most expensive claims are. But it's not a legal requirement to have this. In terms of like UK law, you don't have to have it as a company, but once you have a contract in place, we'll often see, let's say you're licensing in some IP, it'll often be a requirement of the contract that you have a certain level of errors and omissions insurance in place. The reason for that is because whoever you're working with, whether you're licensing an IP, let's say you want to put a Disney character in your game, Disney's going to want to know that if you screw up somehow, misuse their character, misrepresent it, or if it's a publisher, if you're missing your deliverables, or you've gone way off piste, or they feel like you've breached your contract, they want to have the security, knowing that if they were to sue you, there's an insurance policy in place that should pay. And that's another key thing is you've got to make sure, going back to my previous point on what is game insurance, you want to make sure that whatever insurance policy you've got in place, if that happened, and hopefully it never will, but if it happened, your insurance company is not going to turn around and say, oh, you didn't tell us you make video games, you're not covered. And you're left stuck holding the lawsuit. So yeah, professional indemnity probably the most important one, but there's lots of other things, and I'm not going to bore you all today with just rattling off loads of different types of insurance. But yeah, professional indemnity, cyber, lots of different things. There is sort of a shameless plug here, but it's for your benefit. There is a link, or I hope there's going to be a link in the description, Leo, of a guide that's kind of like a one-pager of all the different types of insurance, how they're relevant to games, and a few top tips on there. So yeah, click below and have a read of that.
Absolutely, I'll pop that in the description for our viewers. That's absolutely fine, Phil. No problem at all. I mean, you touched on sort of some of the the expensive nature of the professional indemnity insurance. I mean, how expensive is it? Roughly speaking, I mean, what kind of figures are we talking about here, and do companies really need it?
Yeah, that is a super great question. One of the first questions we get asked is like, okay, well, this all sounds great. What's it going to cost me? And this is a typical sort of insurance broker's answer. Is like, well, it depends. It depends, and it does. Your most expensive bit of insurance is probably going to be your professional indemnity for the reasons that I just mentioned. That's where most of the risk is. That's where the bigger costs are, the bigger lawsuits, the more expensive lawsuits. Things that will affect the price also will be where you're working to. So if you have contracts or clients in America or Canada, it's a much more litigious place. It's more expensive to litigate, more expensive to defend. So if you're working over there, that'll bump up the premium. In terms of the actual costs, if you want some figures, depends again on revenues, turnover, sales figures. The bigger you are, the more sales you have, the more games, the bigger your back catalogue, the more product is out there, the more eyeballs are on the product, and potentially the higher amount that a counterparty could sue for damages on. So let's say you release a game, it's a huge hit, but someone says, oh, well, that was based on our copyright. If you've sold 100 million in revenues on that game, they're going to say, well, we want a big chunk of that. And so that would be more expensive to insure than if it was a smaller indie game that's, pre-revenue, you might have some legal costs, but you can maybe, change the assets out. They'll be a lot cheaper to cover. In terms of pricing, what I'll say is some of our smaller indie companies, they could be paying hundreds, maybe a few thousand it depends on the package as well. If it's just PI, obviously, you're just buying that. But if you start loading on things like contents, equipment, D&O, cyber insurance, it's kind of like a menu. But for sort of a really decent package for smaller indie, maybe somewhere between 1,000 to 5,000, and then when you've got a few games out there, you're doing all right, maybe 10K-ish, depending on what you're buying. Our biggest clients pay in excess of 100,000 a year. So it's really quite a big spectrum of premiums out there. Very much depends on what they're doing, what their exposures are. Obviously, we'll always try to make it as cheap as possible for the customers. But we'd never sell something that was crap. You can go out there and get a professional indemnity policy for a few £100. I'm sure you could, but whether it would cover you for what you do, that's kind of the thing. And we do sometimes see that. We sometimes see companies that aren't really interested in the actual insurance. They just want a piece of paper that has their name on it somewhere so they can show someone else. And I'd always, advise against that. It's only going to come back and bite you in the long run. So yeah.
Definitely. I mean, you touched on earlier as well. I mean, insurance companies sort of paying out. I mean, is it true that's sometimes quite sort of difficult to achieve, or what's your take on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think this is part of the reason that a lot of people find insurance sometimes, I don't want to say distasteful, but sometimes a bit like, oh, insurance, it's a scam, isn't it? Really, just the insurance companies want to line their pockets. And there's an element of truth to that. Insurance companies do want to make profit. In principle, they want to bring in more insurance premiums than they pay out on claims. Otherwise, insurance companies wouldn't exist. The idea of it really is to try to spread the risk and charge a fair premium. So let's say all the insurance companies, they do pay out on claims. Of course they do. And an insurance company would never not pay a valid claim. The thing is, you really need to look at the wording and the circumstances of the claim to see whether it's valid or not. And this is where it's super important to get a decent product from a decent insurer that understands the games industry. That when something comes along, like there's been an issue with the AWS servers were down and our live service game was off for a week, that's an insurance claim. The insurer's like, I don't understand what any of that means. You're going to have a problem. Whereas if it's an insurer that's familiar with the industry, their wording should address that, and it should go through. So what I said about an insurer would never not pay a valid claim, that's true, but you need to look at making sure that you're not in a position where your activities could easily be deemed as not appropriate for this for this kind of wording or insurer. There is also an element of, and again, it's a bit of a shameless plug, but if you're working with a broker that does a lot in the industry and a lot with certain insurers, they can apply some level of leverage to the insurer. So if you get an awkward one where it's kind of a bit on the fence, and you've got a good broker that knows the insurers and knows them well enough, and does enough business with them, they can sort of lean on them a little bit and say, come on, mate, just pay the claim. Otherwise, we're giving you all this other business. Don't be awkward. That sometimes works, not as much as it used to. But yeah, again, it's still a relationship business. It's still very much a relationship business, and games companies, there's no two are alike. So a lot of the stuff that we do, there's a lot of chat with the insurers, still very much a case by case. It's not just, you're a number on a spreadsheet sort of thing. We know our clients, the insurers know them. We find it interesting. The insurers that we work with tend to also generally be quite interested in the industry. So that really helps. So my advice there would be check your wording, make sure you're covered for your activities. Overshare as well. When you're going through the process, tell your broker or tell your insurer everything that you're doing. Overshare. I was going to mention this a bit later on in my sort of top tips wrap up, but we sometimes come across companies that are quite sort of, I don't want to say secretive, but obviously the value in a lot of these games is in the IP, and they don't want to be shouting about it. They don't want to tell us stuff, but it can make it difficult where a company doesn't want to share that they're doing, let's say a racing game or a driving game or something, and there's certain risk considerations there, like with deliveries and so on. It's very easy to get stuff wrong there. So if the insurers aren't aware of your activities, and something comes along later, that can also make things very difficult. So my advice there would be always overshare. Your broker is bound by confidentiality, and so are the insurers. So feel free to discuss and share things. If you hide things and then have a claim later based on something you've hidden, it's like, oh, you didn't tell us you did that. So that's where you can land yourself in some bother. So definitely overshare. Make sure your wording covers you for what you're covered with, and touch wood, you shouldn't have an issue.
Absolutely, that's a really, really interesting, important point to consider there. Yeah, and I think as well, definitely highlighting the sort of going back to that bespoke nature and not having something that's off the shelf and ultimately irrelevant to what your business activities are makes so much sense, really. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've spoken sort of so far about probably more from a sort of developer perspective, but I mean, how are things on the other side of the fence, sort of when outsourcing work or publishing or licensing IP? Are there certain things that those people should be looking for when asking for sort of the other party to provide evidence on their insurance? Is that something that's important to consider too?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of like on the other side of the fence. So if you were a company and you were outsourcing work, and let's say you were Rockstar and you were outsourcing some element of development for GTA 6, right? And whichever company you engage with, you'd want to feel like if they screwed something up and we had to sue them, hopefully you wouldn't sue them, you'd resolve it amicably because you're all friends in this industry. But if something really did go wrong, you'd want to know that they were coming to the table with some decent protection in place. And just having them waving a piece of paper with their name on it that says insurance somewhere, you're like, oh, is that good enough? It might not be. And so when you're sort of engaging with other companies, either as as a publisher or an IP licensor on the other side of the fence, and you're asking these companies to get insurance, do double check what they're coming to the table with. Make sure it's decent, it covers them for their activities. There's kind of a common theme running through this chat today is making sure the insurance actually covers you for what you do. If there's one takeaway from this is make sure your activities are covered and the insurers are on board with it. So yeah, if you're on the other side of the fence and you want to, and again, shameless plug, if you want to get a copy of a sample clause, reach out to us. But yeah, making sure that whoever you're working with is covered. By extension, will cover you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely, no, that's really, really helpful. And I guess as well, Phil, I mean, from your perspective, what are some of the key risks facing the industry in 2024? I mean, I don't want to date this video too heavily because I think it's always going to be relevant. But maybe be interesting to see your take on what are the emerging trends that people really need to consider.
Yeah, so I don't think we could make it through this video without mentioning artificial intelligence at least once. And we've been asked about that a few times, where it's like, oh, can I get insurance for artificial intelligence? And it's kind of like my original point is there's no such thing as artificial intelligence insurance. It's like, can I be covered for artificial intelligence? And really it's like, well, what risk are we looking at there? What has artificial intelligence done? So has it caused a copyright issue? So if you've used AI to generate artwork and put it in your game, has that caused a copyright issue because it's brought in an asset that you weren't expecting, or something that was too similar to other work? So it could be a copyright issue. But there's loads of other, like, I think AI is great. But there's loads of other applications. Could be using AI to sort of upscale existing content, or extend existing content. So that there's a whole thing with SAG-AFTRA at the moment, and the voice actors that are concerned that their voices are going to be used to, they might be paid for doing 100 lines of dialogue, plug it into AI, and then you've got unlimited use. So things like breach of contract claims could come about from that, where have they been paid fairly? Are they breaching the contract by using it in this way? And the insurance is not just because you've like lost a lawsuit. It's there to defend you against these things. So it could be that there's some issue from AI. You defend yourselves and win, but you still got like a bill at the end of it. So yeah, AI is a hot topic at the moment. Another thing that's not being talked about enough, I think, are the copper regulations that are coming out in California. This is something to be aware of if you're if you've got any sort of customer information, especially dealing with children that could be based in California. You have to comply to their rules. I'm oversimplifying it. Go away, do some more research. There's some fantastic lawyers out there, by the way, that know this much better than we do. But yeah, if you've got potential customers in the USA, which is in California, which is a real possibility. If you're selling a product in the USA, it's very difficult to control where people are. You could get stung by this if you're not gatekeeping age-appropriate content properly. There was a lawsuit recently for SpongeBob. I forget the game. It was like a SpongeBob cooking game, and they had to pay $500,000 in fines for that. So that's something to watch out for. Can you get insurance for fines and penalties? The answer is yes, but it depends on where you're getting it from. Yeah, copper regs, check it out, look into that. And of course, the elephant in the room is the general industry conditions at the moment. Lots of layoffs right now. That kind of indirectly affects companies' risks, but we've seen quite a few employment claims, employment tribunals, layoffs that were done unfairly, and then that comes back to bite the company. There's a lot of nuance there. The industry's in a challenging sort of spot at the moment. So yeah, it's sort of ever more important to be trying to future-proof your business. So.
Absolutely. No, you're completely right there. There's some really interesting sort of things to consider for this year, and probably will dominate. Well, a couple of those hopefully won't dominate, but some of them will dominate in the years to come. So I'd be quite interested to hear any final thoughts or top tips that you might have to share with our audience today.
Yeah, absolutely. So tons and tons of sort of top tips. I would say number one, I'm repeating myself over and over here, but make sure you're covered for your activities, and that is as simple as if you want to do the simplest version, look at if you currently have insurance, go away, check your policy, and in your activities, make sure that video game development or game development or something like that is listed accurately. If you've got a policy that just says we're a consultancy service or we're a tech company or IT services, you've got to look very carefully and make sure that the insurer covers you for your true activities. And if you're not sure, pick up the phone and check and say, hey, this is what I do. As I said earlier about oversharing, phone them up, tell them what you do and say, are you sure I'm covered for this? Try and get it in writing. That's top tip number one. Another useful tip, if there's any companies out there that are sort of have a group structure, oftentimes the insurance will cover the holding company and then all subsidiaries automatically. So if you're in a situation where you've got like 10 subsidiaries all over the place, all over the world, perhaps you don't need 10 different policies. If you just insure the holding company, and hopefully that'll be in an easy country like UK, Delaware, EU or something like that, then you can get automatic coverage for all the subsidiaries for most types of insurance. So that can save you an absolute bundle there. Other top tip, read the wording. I know it's boring, or get your broker to explain it to you. This is really what you're buying. So, do try and read it. If you get any midterm sort of changes, so halfway through the year, if you change your business activities, let your broker or insurer know. Make sure you're still covered. If you get acquired or start doing something totally different, tell your insurer. Don't just assume that it's automatic, because they don't know what they don't know. So keep in contact with your broker or insurer. They should be there to help you. They should be willing to take your calls. Shouldn't be hard to get hold of them. Always sort of use them as a resource. Bounce ideas off them. Say, hey, we're thinking of going and doing this. Are we still covered? It could be something weird, like going out and we've been asked about one. Probably guess who it is when I mention this, but they said they wanted to do a skateboarding photo shoot for all their staff, and could that be insured? And that was quite a challenge. Don't hide stuff. Be factual. Be transparent. Another one: NDAs. This is quite a technical point, but worth mentioning. We often get asked to sign NDAs from clients. It's very industry standard in the games industry. Everything's very secret and stuff, and that's fine. It makes sense. But the trouble with NDAs is, as soon as, like, let's say me as a broker, if I sign one, the first thing that I need to do is all the information that you've given to me, I've then got to speak to insurers and go and explain what you do as a business. Now, if I'm under an NDA that prevents me from talking to other people, that can be a problem. So just be mindful of that. Be mindful of that. Back to my point of being transparent. If we're to do our best job and make sure you're protected, you have to tell us what you do. There has to be a level of trust there. So yeah, NDAs important. What else? That's that's probably it for today. I could go on for hours now. I don't want to give people too much insurance stuff for one day. But yeah, if anybody has more questions or wants to learn more, we're really easy to get hold of. Come and meet us at any of the events. We get out and about quite a bit. Pick up the phone. Always happy to chat. Talk to us about video games. We love it. We're here to help. So yeah, I think that about does it. Yeah, Leo,
Absolutely.
is there any other?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, Phil, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We really, really appreciate it. I think you've covered an awful lot of ground there, and really sort of highlighted some of the really, really key points on insurance. And yeah, demystified things a little bit for me as well, to be honest with you. So yeah, super helpful. And I'll pop your details in the description for anyone to get in touch. And I'll also put a link in there for your this year's Good Game Insurance Guide as well. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll update that as we go.
Yes.
So if you're watching this in 2026, there'll be a new one, hopefully. So yeah, reach out to us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, Phil. Really appreciate it. And thank you again today as well for our audience who have tuned in to catch this video. There's plenty of other need to know videos out there on our Ukie TV channel on YouTube. Thank you so much for enjoying this one, and more very soon. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Leo, are you not going to ask them to smash that like button and subscribe?
Maybe. That would be a really good idea, wouldn't it?
Cool, mate. All right, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And like I said, reach out if anybody wants to learn more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Phil. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.